Hey adventurers, so this is episode 3 of my easy entry series. So this is the last one that I have completely written out already, and so I'll probably make more of these. I've got 2 more series that are listed on this list, and so I might continue adding to it as I continue going through this series. But yeah, let's actually go through and see what's on this last list. The way that I separated this out is these are kind of the big epic series, and the ones that could very easily seem daunting to a reader, and some of my reasoning as to why they're less daunting than you would expect, and why they're actually fairly easy to enter into and then go from there. So yeah, let's take a look at this. First one I have is the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks. This is it's a 5-book epic fantasy series, with each of the books being fairly chunky. I don't have them. I would guess between 500 and 800 pages each of them, probably somewhere around the 650 to 700 page mark. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't looked it up, but that's kind of what I would guess. I just based on the length of the audiobooks. That's the only metric that I have to go off of. But anyways, so it seems like it could be a fairly daunting series. However, I don't feel like it is. I feel like it's very easy to get into. I feel like the writing is very accessible. The magic is very fun. You're not going to understand everything that's going on right away, but it's very fun series. The main character is a bit younger, and so it's got that a little bit of that teenage or new adult audience that it can attract with that. But it's just a very, very fast-paced, very action-oriented series with very interesting magic, very well thought out, very colorful. The magic is based on light and colors, and so that's very much part of it. But I feel like it's not hard to read. I feel like it's not hard to get into. That first book, which is titled The Black Prism, I believe, is it's clean, even not like completely without anything, but it's fairly clean, especially for a fantasy series. The rest of the books in the series, or the books 2, 3, and 4, have had significantly more stuff in them than book 1 did. But book 1, I remember reading through it and thinking, man, this is a very clean book, even with some grimy subject material that gets talked about and that gets brought up occasionally in the story. Weeks does it in a fairly clean way, and I might be wrong. My memory I might have tuned those things out and just completely forgotten about them at this point, but I feel like I specifically remember noting that as I was reading it. So that's helpful. That can be a barrier for a lot of people. But yeah, I feel like Lightbringer is not a hard series to the first book. The Black Prism is not a hard book to read by any means. It's very accessible, even though it is longer and quite a bit chunkier. I feel like it's still a decently easy book to sit down and read. It reads really quickly. It reads easily. So yeah, that's the first one that I have on this easy entry series when we're going like epic in scale and in scope and size and all that stuff. The next one that I have is The Bloodstones by Tori Tekken, and this is one where I consider it an easy entry series at the moment, specifically because there's book 1. It is the only book in the series that's out. I feel like because of that, it makes it a lot less daunting, because you see book 1, oh, it's book 1 of a fantasy series. Okay, I can read that. I can catch up, especially since book 2 is coming out, but it is not out yet. It's being actively worked on at the moment, and so we can know that yeah, this is a series that we can catch up on. It's 453 pages, so it's fairly short for an epic fantasy series, but that also adds to its easy entry. The low barrier to entry for it is with its relatively lower page count. So yeah, another one, again, very fast paced, very enjoyable, very easy to connect and immerse yourself in this world. Connect yourself to the characters and immerse yourself in this world. Very interesting story that's being told here. And yeah, I feel like this is another one where it seems a bit daunting, and the cover and the genre and everything, it feels like this should be a daunting series, but especially because only book 1 is out at the moment, that makes that barrier to entry so much lower, because you're not seeing how grand the series really is, and it's one book. It's 450 page book, sure, but it's one book, and that's a lot more accessible than a 5-book series is. Next, I have the Collation Saga by Andrew D. Meredith. This is a series where, yes, it does feel a bit daunting. It looks a bit daunting. These are some big, chunky books, and this is only the first half of the series. There's 4 books in the 8-book series of the Collation Saga. But what alleviates some of that dauntingness is the fact that this is the first arc. There's 4 books in the first arc of the 2 arc series, which is a grand total of 8 books. But these first 4 are all out, they're all completed, and they tell a fairly complete story. Plus, each 2 books tells a fairly complete story, plus each single book tells a fairly complete story in and of itself. So it's very easy to break this series down into smaller chunks, into much smaller chunks than the series as a whole. Besides that, Meredith does an excellent job at introducing this world, introducing you to this world, and as you're going through the world with our characters, you learn more about it. You're thrust into the center of the world, and there's things that are known around the world around you already by the characters, but there's so much that you learn as you follow these characters along. Plus, the character work is excellent, the writing is beautiful, but not so beautiful that it is flowery or purple, or you get bogged down in the prose itself. It's beautiful, it's descriptive in a beautiful manner. And all of those things, I feel, combine together into making a rather daunting, a series that appears on its surface rather daunting, into a much more manageable series and a much more easy entry series. The first book, Deathless Beast, is very easy to get into, to start reading, and to fall in love with the story and the storytelling of it. Plus, and I could say the same thing about Bloodstones, Andrew D. Meredith does the audiobook narrations, and he is excellent at them. He narrates Bloodstones as well, which is why I say I could say that about it. And so the audiobooks for them are just fantastic and great choices for if you're a little bit daunted by the size and mass of these books themselves, which my arm is getting tired holding all 4 of these up, but you can sit there and read the stories, and it's actually not as daunting if you do it through audio, or if you just take one book at a time and follow that, break them into those smaller chunks. The next one I have is the Leoness trilogy by Jack Vance. This is one where it almost feels like it shouldn't belong on this list with the rest of these massive chonker books and series, but I included it because it's an excellent series for one, but also I do feel like it is quite a bit more epic than the books in the other series, or in the other lists that I've made in this series, but also it fits this category of easy entry. There's a low barrier to entry on these books, and these ones might have a little bit higher, but I think it's counterbalanced by the fact that it is a trilogy rather than a longer series, and so that really helps in its favor as well. So the trilogy helps in its favor. The fact that book 1 is a complete story in and of itself, and it's a complete story, and then book 2 adds to that and completes more story, and then book 3 does the same thing, but it is in and of itself a completely enjoyable standalone, not a standalone, I don't want to say it's a standalone, but it's a completely enjoyable book in and of itself. So that also really helps with lowering the barrier to entry on that one. The other thing about it is it's beautifully written, so that's really helpful. It is pre-Arthurian, which means that it's related to the world of King Arthur, which makes us automatically understand the world a little bit better. It's also set on Earth, however it is set on a mythical island called Leoness, or I think Leoness is actually several different islands, but it's a kingdom of Leoness, and but it's set on Earth, and so that really helps us to ground ourselves in the place that we know. The thing that it is not very Earth-like, because it's a fantasy land, it is a fake land, it doesn't exist, and there's a ton of fantastical and fairy and mystical elements to it, mythical elements to it. We're dealing directly with fairies for a lot of the book. However, what makes Soldrin's Garden, which is book 1, particularly accessible to me, for me as a reader, what made it accessible was, well, one, the audiobooks that are excellent. I believe, I can't remember who narrated them. It might have been Simon Vance. No, it wasn't Simon Vance. Simon Vance didn't narrate Jack Vance's books. But whoever the narrator was did an excellent job with them and really immersed you in the world. But also Jack Vance's writing immerses you in the world, and his characters immerse you in the world. And it's never something where it's so intricate that you can't understand what's going on. There's never an intricacy to the series that you won't understand or that you'll lose track of. There's definitely politics in the series, in-world politics. There's definitely magic. There's definitely conniving and scheming and things going on in the background of the series and with the characters, but it's very clear, and it's a very, weirdly enough, it's a very linear story, even though we have a lot of flashbacks and a lot of things looping back around and tying back into things that happened before. But even with that, there's a very linear progression to the story of Soldrin and Soldrin's Garden and how all of that takes place. And us being grounded with this character of Soldrin and being grounded in her story really helps us to immerse ourselves in that world. So yeah, there's a lot of things that really counterbalance this idea that it's an epic, terribly difficult series to get into by the fact that it's a trilogy, by the fact that it's Arthurian, which is something that we're familiar with, by the fact that it's beautiful and it's easy just to sit down and read and listen to. So there's a lot of things counterbalancing the some of the higher, more difficult aspects of this series. Next one I have is the Ashes of Averin series by Thiago Abdallah. This is another huge epic fantasy, dark, maybe grimdark. I wouldn't quite say it's grimdark epic fantasy, but it's very dark. There's a lot of it's essentially about a pandemic, a disease, a plague that is sweeping over the world and taking control of the world, and how are people fighting back against that to some degree. The whole series is about that. But book one specifically, here's some things about this series that make it easy entry or low barrier to entry. There's 2 books in the series out at the moment, book 1 and book 2. Book 1 is, obviously if there's 2 books, it's book 1 and book 2, but book 1 is titled A Touch of Light and book 2 is A Shade of Madness, and it gets more in depth. Book 2 gets more in depth in the politics and the disease and all the things that are going on that are affecting the world. Book 1 is kind of setting all of that up, and one of the unfortunate things about this is that it throws us into a world that has already existed, and so we're kind of expected to pick up on the world and understand the world as we go, but it really helps by kind of showing us the baseline of where this world is at before we dive into the horrors that come in the rest of the series, or in book 2. Book 3 isn't out yet and I haven't read it yet. Book 2 I have read though, and it dives deeper into the series as you go, but the book 1 definitely doesn't do that. Book 1 is very easy to listen to, very enjoyable listen as well. I'm sure it would be the same thing if I had physically read it. However, I said that there's 2 books in the series. There is also a novella titled A Prelude to Ashes, and that is also an excellent starting point to help you to learn the world and some of our characters that we're following, specifically Prince Adrian. It really helps us to get to know his character, get to know the world, get to know the political climate of the different countries and nations and how the things are working together, and so that really helps us. And it's a novella, so it's very small, so both A Prelude to Ashes is a great place to start, as well as A Touch of Light is a good place to start as well. And so having those 2 different areas, 2 different starting points that you could use really helps lower that barrier to entry even more, and so I would definitely recommend those as well. So that's helpful. The next one that I have on here is one that everybody's going to be asking, why is this series on the list? And that is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Specifically, book 1 is The Eye of the World. That's the one that I'm holding up. I don't own all 14 books in a prequel, and that's okay. I'm already scaring you off with just saying that, or trying to claim that this is an easy entry series. And why I say that it's an easy entry series is specifically because book 1 is very easy to read. Book 1 is very immersible. You can immerse yourself in book 1 very easily. You can enjoy book 1 a lot, very, very quickly, very easily. It does not take much to read book 1 and enjoy it. It's very simple. It's a very simple story. It's a very traditional fantasy story. It plays a lot with the tropes from The Lord of the Rings and follows that storyline quite a bit. And so that's very familiar. That's very easy to get into and read. But the other thing about this is book 1 is basically a complete story in and of itself. And even though the paperback is 814 pages, it is still a complete, like, it comes to an ending point and you could say, okay, that is the end of the book. I don't need to read any more of the series, and that would be perfectly fine. And honestly, I kind of wish that I had done that, because the book 1 was probably my favorite book in the series. But yeah, I do feel like it's book 1 is not that daunting if you're just reading one 800-page book versus 14 800-page books. That's significantly more daunting. However, books 2 and 3 do the same thing, where they're a lot more self-contained, where they're even it's kind of like books 1 through 3 are kind of a mini series in and of themselves, with book 1 starting the adventure and then book 3 kind of wrapping it up a little bit. And so yeah, we deal with these smaller chunks quite a bit, and because of that, it actually makes it a lot easier to get into, to start reading the series, than you would expect from a 14 book epic fantasy series that is notoriously long and has a whole entire section called the slog, and is, people talk about Jordan's writing and how he describes things all the time. That's not the case if you just take book one book and read book 1. And so because of that, I do actually feel like this is a much easier series to get into than people are expecting, and it's a lot less daunting to experience than you would expect just from seeing, "Oh, but I have to read this 14-15 book epic fantasy series." If you look at it that way, yeah, it's daunting. If you look at one book, it's a lot more manageable. The next one I have is not a fantasy series, and that kind of automatically makes it a lot less daunting in a lot of ways for a lot of readers who don't read fantasy or are not well versed in fantasy, whatever the case. But anyways, the next series that I have is the D'Artagnan Romances by Alexander Dumas. This is a 5-book series, very epic for sure, very big. Lots of they're all big books. This one is 700 pages, so it's definitely not a small book by any means, but it is a very, the first book is The Three Musketeers, which is a story that pretty much everybody already knows, which makes it a lot more accessible because you already know the story. You just don't know all there is to know about the story until you read the book. Part of what makes it so accessible is Alexander Dumas is a fantastic storyteller. There's so much humor, there's so much wit, there's so much fun to this book, to this series. Our characters, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, as well as D'Artagnan, and the other characters that we come in contact with as well, they're just fantastic characters, and they're so fun to read, and the banter between them. And as you're reading, or in my case, as I did, listening to this series, you hear them and you just connect to the characters, and you're just having fun, and you don't realize how much time is passing, how fast the story is going by, until you stop and look at it and you're like, wow, I read a lot of this already. And yeah, it's long. It's absolutely a long series, but it's fantastic. It's brilliant. It's so sharp in so many different ways. Obviously they've got swords, so it's sharp in that way as well. But no, it's just, the wit is sharp, the characters, the humor, there's so much to it. But then the story, the depth of the story, it's called a romance, and in our modern language, we use that to mean it's a love story between two characters. There is an aspect of that to this story. It's not as strong as most of the adaptations make it out to be, but there is an aspect of that to it. But that is not what romance here means. Romance is like a swashbuckling adventure type story. That's kind of what it used to mean. That's not a perfect, accurate description or definition of what romance means, but that's a lot more akin to what it means than the love story. And that's what we're getting at when we say it's in the D'Artagnan romances. And so there's 5 of them, like I mentioned. It depends on how the translators broke them up or the publishers broke them up, because sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 4, sometimes 6. It just kind of depends. But the important thing is start with the Three Musketeers, a story that you already know, a story that you already probably enjoy, and read the actual story. Don't watch the adaptations, because there are good adaptations and there's fun adaptations, but read the book, because it's so much better than you are expecting, and it's so much easier and so much more accessible than you are expecting it to be. Next one I have is another one where people are going to ask, why are you considering this an easy entry series? And that is Dune by Frank Herbert. Why do I consider the Dune series to be an easy entry series? Well, simply because you can read this first book and not read the rest of the series. You can read this book as a standalone and be perfectly content. You don't have to read any more past this. And that makes it a lot easier, a lot more manageable, a lot more digestible, a lot less daunting. And so yeah, that in and of itself makes it very easy to get into. This is definitely one of the harder ones to get into. Of the series, is one of the ones that you're going to struggle with the most likely. It's sci-fi, which helps. If you are scared of fantasy, it helps that it's sci-fi. If you're scared of sci-fi, it helps that it's fantasy. It's a science fantasy story. And yeah, if you really want to dig into this story and get into it and to delve in and really understand all that's going on, that's a bit more daunting. That's a bit more trying and takes a bit more effort. However, if you just want to enjoy the story, you can just read the story and enjoy the story for what it is, and you'll come to the end of the book and say, wow, that was a fun story. Because of that, that in and of itself makes it a lot less daunting if you can just read the story and you don't have to dig in and try and understand it all. So yeah, there's a lot of things about this series that really make it a lot less daunting than people make it out to be. It's not as long as people think it is. This is the last page is 603, so it's a 600-page book. That's not that bad for a lot of these epic, massive series, and so I definitely think it's a lot less daunting than people think it is, and it's one of those ones where just try it, and you'll probably be pleasantly surprised by how much easier it was to get into than you were expecting. The next series I have on this list is The Pendragon Cycle by Stephen R. Lawhead. This is a 6-book series. This is an Arthurian fantasy series. It's about King Arthur. It's a tale of King Arthur. So 6 books and epic Arthur tale. That is pretty daunting in a lot of ways, but it's also, because it's King Arthur, that makes it less daunting in a lot of ways, because it's 6 books that are relatively reasonably sized. 486 pages is this paperback. That's a relatively reasonable size especially for a fantasy series. So yeah, those two things help a lot. You can also, it really helps that each of the individual books are individual stories. Yes, they tie back into the previous books that have come before them. In fact, I don't know that with Aurelia, which is the most recent book, which is a prequel to some of them. It's set kind of in between, but anyways, it doesn't matter so much. The books are pretty much standalones in the series, in the world, and that's really helpful because you can just pick up a book and read it and enjoy it or not and put it down, and you don't have to continue if you don't want to, or you can continue if you want to. For me, I picked up the first book, struggled a little bit getting into it, got hooked on it, and binged the rest of the series. And so at the time when I read this, Aurelia wasn't out yet, and so I couldn't read that one. Because of that, it's the type of series that hooks you and you just makes you want to binge the series. And that's something that is a lot less daunting when you know that this is a series that just pulls you in immediately, or not immediately, but it's a series that just pulls you in and makes you invested so much so that you want to keep reading, even if your enjoyment of each successive book goes down a little bit. I'm doing a really bad job at making this one sound not daunting, at making it sound like an easy entry series, but really it is. It's very, the writing is not, I'm not doing a good job at this at all. The writing is not the most easy to get into in a lot of ways. It seems kind of boring. I'll say it that way. The first section starts out pretty boring. By about halfway in, you're absolutely in, or I was in. It took me, I think it was about 30%, if I remember correctly, until I really got sold and hooked on the story. And then I was like, oh, okay, now I'm in. Now I want to continue reading. But also the characters in this book. I loved the characters. Taliesin is one of my new favorite characters from, I guess it was last year that I read these books. But Taliesin is one of my favorite characters. The other characters, the relationships, Karis as well. I really like Karis as a character. As you read the series, as you read this first book, you start to immerse yourself in this world, in this, it is our Earth. It is a historical take on the Arthur tale with a lot of magic and quite a bit of anachronistic words or phrases or ideas, or for the most part he does a really good job with timelines, but there are some things that are not quite accurate. But yeah, it's one of those series where I can't describe it, how easy it is to get into, but it was really genuinely very easy to get into, and I put it on this list, I think, specifically because, well, one, I loved it, but two, specifically because I read book 1 and then I binged books 4 through 5, or books 2 through 5, and like I didn't listen to any other books in between those 5 books. And so that's something very unique for me, very different for me, and something that I think can show how low the barrier to entry on this series is. Because I read the first book and I loved it so much that I just had to continue reading the series, and I didn't get tired of listening to it. It was just, I was invested the entire way through. So yeah, that may be my best selling point on why I feel like this is not why I feel like this is an easy entry series. And now we come to the final book the final series on this list, and this is one where, again, you're gonna kind of think, why do you have to even include this? But that is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Why is this an easy entry series? Well, Lots of different reasons, lots of different ways of looking at it. There's so many adaptations. Most people know the story from pop culture, from the movies, whatever it might be. Most people know some aspect of this story. Why is it an easy entry series? Well, it's not as daunting. It's not actually as hard to read as people think it is, or people pretend that it is. It's genuinely a lot easier to read than people expect. It's a lot more immersive than people expect. It's a lot more engaging than people expect. The other thing about it is you can think of it as not a series, but rather one book, with The Lord of the Rings being the book. Or you can think of it as a trilogy, which trilogies are naturally very easy to get into, a lot less daunting to get into. And so that helps in and of itself. It's just those things really help to easily get into this series. It's a lot better than people are expecting it to be. The other thing why I say that it's an easy entry series is because you don't have to start with Fellowship. You could start with The Hobbit, which is a prequel, or rather, The Lord of the Rings is the sequel to The Hobbit. And so I would recommend you start with The Hobbit, and which is a lot more accessible, a lot more fun, a lot more episodic. Not that Lord of the Rings is not fun, don't get me wrong, it's very fun, very enjoyable. But The Hobbit is a children's story. This is a fairy story. This is a story that Tolkien wrote for his kids, and it reads like it and it feels like it, but it still maintains the depth and the character development and the journey and the themes that an adult book, a book written for adults, should include. If it doesn't include, I feel like you failed quite hard with your fantasy book. And I know that people write books for different reasons, but this is one of the best. This is widely considered the best fantasy book. If not this one, then Lord of the Rings. Either way, this series is a lot less daunting than people think it is, and it's a lot easier to get into and a lot funner than people accept. Plus, there's several different manners that you can go about consuming this story. Obviously, the movies is one which I wouldn't recommend if you're trying to say that you read the books. Don't watch the movies because they're drastically different. What you could do is there's several different audiobooks, fantastic audiobooks that are very engaging, very well narrated. There's also a BBC audio drama, which is, again, I wouldn't recommend it if you're trying to say you've read the books, because of the fact that it's an adaptation that is not a faithful adaptation to the books. It cuts out a lot of things, but it is also another great way to consume the story. So yeah, the Lord of the Rings, I couldn't get away with not including it on one of these lists, but yeah, it's just, this is a much easier series to get into than people expect. The books are everywhere. You can find them at every used bookstore. You can find them at every new bookstore, not because they're bad books, just because they're so popular. They're so wildly popular, and they're genuinely that good. They deserve to have the popularity that they do. So yeah, absolutely 100%. The two starting points, that's a big selling point for my easy entry criteria. Criterium is the plural. But yeah, so I definitely recommend try Lord of the Rings. It's not as daunting as you think it is. Just try it out, see what you think. If you're still scared of Lord of the Rings, start with The Hobbit. It's well worth it. Both books are well worth it. So yeah, definitely my favorite book series of all time. Go ahead, read it, please. So anyways, that is my third video on this easy entry series with more of an epic theme to it, I guess. This is looking more at these epic series. So yeah, absolutely. If you have any more suggestions of series or whatever, please put them in the comments down below. I want to hear more. I will be compiling more of these lists as I can think of more books that fit into kind of categories that I can kind of categorize them by. I'm slowly working on some other ones, but yeah, please, absolutely let me know what you think of these books, of my suggestions, of my reasoning for why I feel like they're a lot easier than people give them credit for, or a lot less daunting. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventurer. We post videos every Monday and Thursday, and have our social medias linked in the description down below. We will see you guys again soon. Stay well.